Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. There's nothing really to talk about today. No news, no updates. So we're bringing this film back for discussion. I'd love your sophisticated thoughts on this movie. I don't want to hear it sucked or it was good. I want paragraphs about what you think about this movie. Now, I love this movie, but I don't mind if you don't, as long as you're sophisticated about your reasons for not liking it. Maybe you like some things about it and some things you don't. That's okay too. Whatever you want to say, constructively, I'm happy to read the comments. So, look, the meltdown for this film was amazing. At the time, it's nothing like the MCU, blah, 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 too much destruction. Everything. Superman doesn't speak enough. He only says a certain amount of words. You know, people were looking for every reason to hate this film. This is a very sophisticated, there's sophisticated commentary, not just about Superman, but about the environment, about a planet dying because a governing body, the Kryptonian Council, made the wrong decisions. The Kryptonians were explorers. They found uninhabited planets. They went there, they lived there, and then they decided to stop exploring. They stopped being an exploration culture, and they used their natural resources, right? They drained their natural resources. Sound familiar? So they were really doing something very interesting. Goya's script was very, very interesting. It was making Krypton a parallel for the planet Earth. But that concept of Krypton being destroyed in the first place, Krypton's always been a parallel for the planet Earth and the problems with the world we live in. The Kryptonian Council in denial of what's going on. Because on the planet Krypton, they no longer use the natural means of birth. So they started cloning children and implanting them with what they were going to be. Maybe they'd be a soldier, a general like Zod, and things like that. And Jor-El and Lara decided that this wasn't the way. So they had the first natural birth in generations. So when we start on Krypton, you see this beautiful CGI, don't you? I mean, look. It's probably the best version of Krypton ever. That's because they had the technology to give you the best version of Krypton ever. Let's not forget about that. All this stuff on Krypton is something you're actually not going to see on Superman Legacy because it's not going to be an origin story. Well, you may see Krypton through flashbacks and, maybe some kind of way via, tutoring crystals on the Fortress of Solitude. We know James Gunn will introduce a Fortress of Solitude in Superman Legacy. There's no question this film is going to be heavily, people are going to be comparing Superman Legacy with Man of Steel. And it's going to be interesting how Man of Steel holds up compared to Superman Legacy. Of course, there's going to be a lot of toxic people saying, oh, Superman Legacy is much better than Man of Steel. Other people saying Man of Steel is so much better than Superman Legacy. It's rinse and repeat. I would absolutely expect those types of comparison, and you're very naive if you never expected those types of comparison. Man of Steel is a very, very smart, modern, contemporary kind of commentary on Superman. Very, very contemporary. Visually, it's absolutely stunning. And it really is an amazing film if you open yourself up to it. I think the problem is for some people, they don't like things that are different. And you had the Marvel Cinematic Universe at the time. Man of Steel takes itself very seriously. There's no question about that. There's not many gags in the movie, and that bothered some, and I don't know why. Some were bothered how many times, Superman saved someone, or how many times he smiled. I mean, it was outrageous at the time. It really was. The style of the film didn't suit some people, but it suited me. I thought it was a sensational film. And I mean, I went to the cinema to see it how many times? 3 or 4 times. I really, really enjoyed this film. It was a Superman film. He's my favourite character. It was very exciting at the time. It has an outstanding score. It really does, full of anthems and themes, hardcore, typical Hans Zimmer. Amazing score. They cast Henry Cavill. They had Amy Adams as Lois Lane. They had Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White. Outstanding casting. Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent. Diane Lane, one of the best castings in comic book history, as Martha Kent. Russell Crowe as Jor-El. Michael Shannon as General Zod, a very different General Zod to what Terence Stamp played back in the 70s and 80s with Superman the movie and Superman 2. He was so different. No kneel before Zod, no pantomime villain kind of thing. He had reasons for being the way he was, and his mission was to save Krypton. The way I suppose these kind of dictators claim they're trying to save their countries by doing things that are very immoral to other people. It had that kind of commentary to it. So it's a very, very different way at doing a Superman film. Henry Cavill feels like Superman in the movie, but he feels like Superman at the beginning. Superman makes mistakes in this movie. He's very reactive when he goes after Zod, when Zod goes after Martha. You think you're going to threaten my mother? I mean, I fucking love that bit. So don't fuck with Superman's mum, right? Who would be stupid enough to fuck with Superman's mum? Well, only General Zod of Kandor, right? And, well, he got beats, mate. And too right, I'd do the same thing. So I like that element of Superman. He was very reactive. He was in training. He wasn't the calm, composed Superman we've known of the past, because he has to put the costume on. He has to come to Earth's rescue because there's no one else around. And Zod's turned up. Zod wants to turn Earth, into Krypton. And so that's, at the end, he has to step up. He has no choice. He finds out who his father is. He discovers the ship. He finds the costume. I mean, I think one of my favourite moments in this film is the first flight. Zimmer's music. I love that he's leaping, because in the original comics he couldn't fly. He could only leap from skyscraper to skyscraper. So Snyder, and I don't know if Goyer and Nolan decided to do this within their own script. So Snyder's got him in the Arctic somewhere as he comes out of the ship. He's leaping from spot to spot, and it's so cool. Then he flies. But what I love about this, he's enjoying flying, but he hasn't got used to it yet. So he falls to the ground, and I think that's so awesome. And then the way he kneels and he can hear, Jor-El's voice, and he gracefully flies, it's absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best moments in comic book movie history. It's one of my best experiences. I absolutely adore the tornado flashback, which was obviously inspired by the season 1 Smallville finale, Tempest, where there is also a twister, a tornado. And it's clear that Snyder and Goyer and Nolan were very much inspired by certain elements of Smallville. So you have this place, where Clark's getting bullied, and at the background you see the company is owned by Sullivan, because Chloe Sullivan was in Smallville and she was very popular. Obviously, stuff happened to the actress who played Chloe. She was arrested, blah, blah, blah. So that's very sad. But anyway, Chloe Sullivan was a great character in Smallville. And Snyder and his kids used to watch Smallville together. Who didn't? Cool show. Still rewatching it today. So it had a lot of Easter eggs from other elements of, Supermen from the past and adaptations from the past. It was very, very cool that way as well. But this is a Superman film that doesn't try and copy other versions. It does its own thing. Cavill hasn't got a spit curl. The Superman costume doesn't have the red trunks. It really is a movie that's very grounded, and it's just doing its own thing. And it really is trying to set this character up for a modern audience. And it's also trying to show that there's more than Superman in this universe. So you see like the Wayne satellite, the Luford lorry, the truck, whatever you want to call it. So there's some cool kind of nods to the DC universe, which is very different to what James Gunn's doing. James Gunn's going to actually introduce some characters physically from the DC universe in Superman Legacy, which is also going to be very, very exciting. We'll see how that pays off or doesn't pay off when the movie is released. We've got a few years to wait. Yeah, well, actually, we don't have a few years to wait. It's next fucking year. Next summer, Superman Legacy is released. So that's crazy, right? So the movie has great emotional beats and it has great action. I think that's one of the things I always appreciated about the movie. It had action, it had emotion, it had those talky scenes where today people say that's a problem with pacing. Just because two people are speaking, it doesn't mean there's a problem with pacing. It can't all be fast, fast, fast. But Man of Steel actually is actually like, it's an adrenaline. Man of Steel is an adrenaline shot from beginning to end. I've never seen a superhero movie like it. It just goes, and until the moment that, Superman has to break Zod's neck, controversial moment, of course we'll get to that, but it's a fast-paced, exciting movie, but it has a great narrative, it has a great story. These gorgeous action set pieces are all happening for a reason. And what you can see, what I like, the analogy between Superman and Zod is Zod is a well-trained soldier. Faora is a well-trained soldier. Because I love the fight between Faora and Superman because you can tell he hasn't had any training. He's just brute strength because of his abilities and powers, and she has been trained. And she gets a few digs in. She throws him to the safe in that iconic shot. They've got an advantage over him because they're trained soldiers, but he has an advantage over them because he's been able to hone his abilities, his different abilities. And this is another great element from Man of Steel. It shows that Clark and the Kryptonians, when Clark's a boy, he has trouble, dealing with all the senses, and they're too much for him. That's why he's in the class and he runs in the cabinet. That's all great, and they do the same thing to Zod and Faora. They find it difficult to hone in all their senses. And even though, we don't know people with superpowers and it's probably not possible to have superpowers, it's a very grounded thing to do to show them coming to terms with their powers. So that was kind of something I really appreciated about the movie. One of the characters that got the most contemporary take in the movie was Lois Lane. Lois Lane's always been strong, independent. She's always been a journalist to expose people from hurting people. She's always been a hero in a societal sense herself, but this was a very kind of a more different Lois Lane. I love the arguments between her and Perry in this film, the way she really wanted to report in what she saw, that she saw, Clark in the ship and all of that, and Perry's not having none of it. And all the, it's very modern day in terms of journalism and a newspaper where, he was saying the newspaper wanted to sue her. That's something we wouldn't see in the Christopher Reeve movies, or the older TV shows. But, journalism has changed and there's a lot of suing and, you can't break the rules. As a journalist today, you've got to be very, very careful as a journalist today. They don't have the freedom they once did. So again, that was very, very grounded. So I love that element. But I think they did a very important thing because I think a lot of people have criticised the fact that in some versions, Lois doesn't know Clark Kent is Superman. And, if you've seen Superman up close and you've seen Clark up close, it kind of puts into question Lois's intelligence levels. But what I didn't like in the past is how maybe Superman came out to Lois and how she didn't really know. Well, I think in Man of Steel they've handled it the best in live action because she meets him without the glasses in the spaceship when he saves her. So she knows who he is. There's no hiding who he is now. He can't disguise. Some people, I see some reactions on YouTube when they say, when she sees him in the Daily Planet, doesn't she recognise him? Of course she fucking recognises him. She's bantering with him. Welcome to the planet. Don't you get it? But yeah. So this Lois Lane knows that Clark Kent is Superman, and the way they do it is they make her part of his first adventure. She meets like Jor-El, and he explains everything to her, and she becomes a vital cog to solving the, what's going on. But I really like the fact that we don't see Zod after Krypton for quite a while in the film. And then when the ship arrives, when you're watching it first time, you're not too sure who's on that ship, and then you hear the voice and he says, "My name's General Zod." And I love that because that's interesting. They could have saved Zod for another movie like Dick Donner did in 1978, but Zod's part of this movie, and it's not just a random alien invasion. By Clark going on the ship, he's alerted their scout ship. So they come to Earth and they want to turn Earth into Krypton. And again, this is an element I really appreciated from David Goyer and Christopher Nolan, because our governments for years have been looking for other planets to see if they're, that are inhabitable for us to leave this planet on, because this planet in the end will not be habitable. It's as simple as that. It's a scientific fact. So lots of echoing of that situation as well, which I really appreciated. So there's a lot of kind of commentary on different things. The environment, the analogy of Krypton being fucked up by its leadership, like a lot of us believe is the same way our leaders are fucking up our planet and ignoring what's in front of them. So those elements are really, really good. And the relationship between Clark and his mother is fantastic. The dynamic between Jonathan and Clark in the flashbacks are outstanding as well. Kevin Costner is an outstanding Jonathan Kent, and I'm someone whose favourite Jonathan Kent prior Costner was definitely John Schneider from Smallville. He was my TV dad. He was fucking amazing. The way they wrote for him, the way he played it, because John took it seriously. He took the father-son dynamic seriously, and him and Tom Welling had a great relationship, and still do if you watch the Talkville podcast with Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum. And so, yeah, he's a great Jonathan Kent. I mean, Costner is my Mount Rushmore of actors. The man's a legend, and to have him and Russell Crowe as Superman's two dads in the film was pioneering, brilliant. I mean, you can't find two better guys to play Superman's father. So I was well happy with that. But Diane Lane for me is a standout, not just in Man of Steel, but in the entire Snyderverse. She is an outstanding actor, and she does one hell of a job. Her chemistry with Henry Cavill is out of this world. It really is great. Don't forget, in Man of Steel, she was still quite young. And they made her up to look older, and they do in BVS as well. And her performance was outstanding, because they could have cast an age-accurate actor, but they didn't. And Diane Lane was outstanding. And I mean, in the past, I liked Diane, but I didn't know she was that good an actor. I underestimated her, to be honest. I suppose it's all about the directors you work for, the writing, and kind of the meat in the sandwich. But she was obviously well directed by Snyder as well. Snyder is a really good director, by the way. A lot of people just see him as a visual director, but actors really like Snyder. They like him a lot because he's a respectful guy. He's a respectful guy, and he knows how to manifest performances from actors, which of course is very, very important. So Diane Lane is absolutely outstanding. I could sit here speaking about Michael Shannon as Zod till next year. I mean, he's better than Ledger's Joker. Ledger's Joker is great. There's a lot of great villains in CBMs that are great. I don't think anyone has ever done a better job than Shannon. And Goya's writing for Shannon in this movie is fucking peak. You get what this guy wants, right? He ain't fucking evil. Let's be clear. General Zod in Man of Steel is not evil. He was bred to be a soldier, to protect his planet at all costs. In a way, he's a bit of a Vladimir Putin, if you like, but a Vladimir Putin who's not a ruler, but a soldier. And all he cares about is his people and recreating Krypton. And that's tunnel vision. He doesn't care how many people he kills. He doesn't want to kill people. He knows he's being cruel. He tells Kal-El, no matter how cruel my actions are, I will do anything to save my people. But there's something even more beautiful about his performance, and it's all about his relationship with Jor-El. The regret when he stabs him, the regret in his face. It's brilliant acting by Shannon. I don't know if it's in the script. When he wipes out the artificial intelligence that's Jor-El, and Jor-El vanishes, again you see the regret in his eyes. He really loved this guy, but they became enemies. They went on two different sides on a very serious issue. But it's clear there was a friendship. And David Goyer was looking to do a Man of Steel prequel about Zod and Jor-El, and you know, Crow and Shannon were going to be in that prequel. I heard a lot of rumours about this. I think it was true. I think it was at least, you know, in the thought process. I think that's what the Krypton series turned into being. But originally it was going to be a movie. It was going to be awesome, and Crow and Shannon were going to be in it. Big shame. But Shannon is a big part of why this film is so good and so beloved. Henry Cavill is an outstanding Superman. There's no question of physically he looks how Superman should look. But I like Cavill. I think he's a really, really good Superman. Look, there's lots of different ways that you could go with Superman. You know, I'm not saying that Cavill was the only guy who could have played Superman. There's a lot of people with black hair and blue eyes who can play Superman. I'm not saying that if Cavill didn't play him, nobody else could. What I'm saying to you is he's a very, very good Superman. And even looking back now, it's going to be very, very interesting. And you can tell that David Corenswet does look like Cavill a hell of a lot. He also looks like Superman, by the way. But he's a really, really good Superman, as far as I'm concerned. An outstanding Superman, very popular with a lot of people out there, and very popular with me as well. A brilliant Superman that deserved a hell of a lot more than what he got. In the end of this film is a very controversial moment. Actually, there's a few controversial moments. Let's go back to Jonathan Kent, actually, when he's having a go at his son for saving the bus, worried that people would have seen him. Obviously, Pete Ross's mother is already onto him, and Jonathan is worried, of course. And, young Clark goes, what do you expect me to do? Let them die? And Jonathan goes, well, maybe. And there was lots of misunderstandings about Man of Steel. It's a bit like the tornado sequence when, Jonathan basically wants Clark to let him die because he doesn't want to out himself as an alien. And Clark freezes and he doesn't save his father, and it's haunted him all of his life. It's very similar to what they did in Smallville, the way Jonathan Kent died of a heart attack, and Clark always blamed himself, right? Because basically the fight with Lionel that caused that heart attack in the Reckoning episode was about Clark. So Clark has never let that go in the Man of Steel movie as well. So there's a lot of guilt there. But again, you've got to understand why they're doing that. They're trying to make a point that people would have been too bigoted towards him. And Jonathan understood that. But yeah, so you get that whole thing, where people got upset about Jonathan saying, maybe you should have let them die. Because he's saying it's not just about you, it's not about us, there's so much to this. And if you out yourself, they're gonna, people are gonna be bigoted. You're gonna be under the microscope. And that's why he said, maybe you should have let them die. I'm sure Jonathan Kent didn't really want that. He's just a father, frightened for his son. You don't even have to be that intelligent to understand the meaning around that. But there was an even more controversial moment to come. And it's the moment when Superman breaks Zod's neck. I know that people have this kind of tunnel vision about Superman not killing. And I've always been aware of that. And there's always been this kind of debate from Snyder fans, well, Christopher Reeve's Superman and Superman 2 also killed Zod and his cohorts in the Fortress of Solitude. And at the time, as a kid, I didn't really think that. I thought, well, they've just gone down the slidey thing in the ice and they're at the bottom in a prison somewhere. I don't know. I didn't see them die, right? Don't forget, in Man of Steel, you actually see Superman break the guy's neck. It's physical, it's hard-hitting, right? Let's not forget that. There's a difference between what Superman does in Superman 2. Whether he kills them or not, That's a debate for another time. But when you're seeing your hero, a pure-hearted hero who's not supposed to kill, break somebody's neck, it's very controversial. But within the story, Superman has no choice. Personally, even though my first kind of experience of Superman was Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve, very pure and light and all of that, I was comfortable with Superman killing Zod. I thought it was an amazing, compelling moment. It was very well done. I love the way Cavill screams, after he does that. I love the reaction to that. But a lot of people just didn't like it and never forgave the franchise for doing it. And that's sad, But then you have to look at it. You have to look at Christopher Nolan and David Goyer and Zack Snyder and think, it was Goyer's idea for Superman to break Zod's neck. You have to think and say, should we really do this? I think that's the question. You can defend it. I can defend it, right? I'm fine with it. But at the end of the day, Superman has a history. And I've explained this to all you guys and girls before. There's some characters that people won't tolerate certain changes. I've spoken about Smallville as a comparison. Smallville changed so much canon from the original canon. But Smallville wasn't changing anything that says that Clark's not a pure character. And I think Clark did get quite dark at times in Smallville as well. So there was kind of some controversial stuff with Clark in Smallville as well. But never as controversial as Superman breaking somebody's neck. As I say, I wasn't one of those people who was outraged by this. I just saw this as a different version. This is a version where Superman had to kill Zod. And in the other versions, he didn't. And that's fine. So I was fine with this, but there was a reaction. And some people and some diehard Superman fans simply didn't like it. But I think these things would have been addressed if Nolan and Goyer returned from Man of Steel 2. They didn't, so that moment was never referenced again. But I believe in my heart that if Goyer was allowed to stay on with Nolan, they would have referenced that. And, I think that Clark would look back at that moment and learn from that moment. And, I've killed once, I never want to kill again. It's something we've spoken about at great length before as well. But despite all the controversy, Man of Steel is a visual and emotional masterpiece and a sensory delight. It really is for me. I really had a brilliant experience from watching it. I'll never forget it. It was one of the greatest movie experiences of my life. I remember seeing the trailers and saying to my brother, I can't believe this film's going to be this good. No way is this film going to be this good. They've just edited some good scenes together. No film is going to be this good. But it was. Because for the first time, maybe ever, we saw Superman fighting, but fighting properly. In Superman Returns, the complaint was there wasn't enough action, that Superman just wasn't punching anyone. And of course, we got that in Man of Steel. We saw a proper physical fight between Superman and Zod, and the other Kryptonians as well. But there's a lot to this film. There's a lot, it's a lot more than just it being a visual masterpiece. It really is a really good contemporary way of looking at Superman in the modern day. And maybe the problem was it was too contemporary. But I've always said, despite it not making the money that WB wanted, just under 700 million, was still very good. And as I said many times on this channel about the box office, it proves if it wasn't for a few moments in the film, this film could have done a lot better. And I think the moment we've discussed, of course, about the neck breaking, I think that's not in the film. Then that film definitely leaped from 670 or whatever it was to maybe 870 or 970. I think there was an audience there for Man of Steel. There's an audience there for Superman. It'd be interesting if James Gunn gets a better box office than Man of Steel. That's going to be very interesting. People will be jumping on that because that's the society. It doesn't matter what fandoms you're talking about. Everyone jumps on it. So if it's successful, people say, "Oh, look, it's more successful than MOS." If it's less successful than MOS, people are going to make sure that people who don't like James Gunn and unhappy that Henry Cavill wasn't continued as Superman will be using that against James Gunn. You can understand that as well. But Henry Cavill was a great Superman, and BVS would end up being more divisive than Man of Steel. But BVS is another film I really, really enjoyed. So next time there's not much DC news, we will discuss BVS. And I know we've discussed it before. But the point is about films like this, there's always more to discuss. Because there's no question, Man of Steel, BVS and the Snyder Cut are aging ever so well. And I'm open to what James Gunn's doing. I really am. But I will never forget the Snyderverse.